crap. These German units I just found in my, looking at my list of reinforcements. I forgot to set up the Germans for this year. So this is what hasn't come in that should have. I'm just going to bump them all in now. I figure, with the Belgians out of the war, it's not unreasonable to say, well, maybe some more troops were bled off for the East Front or whatever. Just pretend whatever you want to. Anyway, those are going to come in first turn of March. They should have come in already in January and February. I was just looking and I'm like, how come I don't have any German reinforcements this month? I don't think I had any last month. I'm assuming I didn't put any down for January either. So that's, a best guess as to where I am. And I'll fill out the rest of the year. Every time I deal with the damn reinforcement booklet, I just am furious. I just want to quit the game. I'm serious. Again, all the same issues. Units without the right numbers on them, and just this feeling of, I don't know what I'm doing. Units being pulled out of the game for, 2 months and then come back in. Stuff that I haven't withdrawn that I find, I've got the 3rd Guard Infantry Division I forgot to withdraw. It's just, however realistic this is all trying to be, that thing is making it fail. Because there's no way. There is no way that this alone, without some kind of computer aid or without, the Avalon Hill games that used to deal with this kind of crap, right, gave you this order of battle sheet where you would put all the units on and move them around and everything. You need something like that. If you're going to deal with something on this scale, you need something like that if you're going to handle this kind of crap. And there's no reason for it. I mean, I've said again and again, there's no reason for that kind of, we've got this particular unit here. Well, they're not going to be deployed the same way, so you're not going to withdraw and move them in that same way. And the truth of the matter is, there was probably a significant amount of flexibility as to which units were broken up and which were not. I don't know. I don't feel like you're gaining anywhere near what the cost is for it. And I've said that again and again. And normally, when I'm dealing with that kind of situation, and, most of the games are step-loss type games, right? That handle this. They aren't games that are almost entirely strength point games. Mine is, because every single goddamn strength point is almost accounted for in this. I lost a strength point. Not I lost a step, right? Okay, that's great. But once you make that decision, why make it a fucking hell on the players by making them jiggling these units all over the place? It's no longer that important. It really isn't. Now, I guess maybe for some people it's real important that, that's the 16th Infantry Division. My grandfather served in that. Okay, maybe. But what are you going to do? It's not like the units' designations really make a damn bit of difference. They really don't. Anyway. It feels like a tremendous headache to me. There's a reason that the games which did worry significantly about units didn't try to keep track of every single strength point. And there's a reason that games that keep track of strength points don't bother keeping track of every single unit. Something like Empires and Arms. Strength points are just this, accepted factor. You don't have to have every unit designation. I don't know. It's not like, units weren't broken down and shifted around. It's not like the game doesn't represent that with these damn things where they have these, you got to strip strength points off some other units to move them. It just is all this complexity that is just really entitled, that's the wrong word. It's just really there in order to frustrate the hell out of people like me, I'm convinced, and make us say, damn, that sucks. I don't know. I wouldn't mind this if this was campaign for North Africa. With the kind of reputation that has, you expect it to be a hellish, miserable time. Something that was made in the modern day, I just don't expect this kind of headache to go with it. Anyway, I'm done for the night. I don't know. I was really enjoying myself. The German orders, because they're always yanking their troops all over the place, are much, much worse than the Allied ones. And although the Allied ones aren't too good either, because they're pulling people out and putting the same unit back in place, same unit designation, but with a different strength to indicate these upgrades or whatever. Just give me a baseline of how many strength points I can have on the board, a reserve pool, and these replacements coming in, and then these major fluctuations where troops had to get pulled off. Well, that can reduce the amount of strength points you're allowed in the pool overall. It would all work very, very easily and be so much less of a headache. Oh, well. All right, so actually deploying, the Germans bumped themselves over 200 again. Hey, another auto loss, right? Took care of it immediately, set up a big attack along this line into this hex. But, well, the French didn't have a better supply situation, except for one thing: the weather's changed. And where they would not have been supplied last turn, they used up all the supply in this region and didn't boot it around, figuring it didn't really matter. Now they can draw from anywhere on the board, essentially. They have to go from the local areas first. And they were actually able to do tremendous damage back to the Germans. Just die roll thing. Germans rolled a 1, French rolled a 6. And so the Germans only did 5 points with the -2 for the woods up there. And the French did 13 to the Germans. Not a good play for the Germans, but they had to do something, and there really weren't many other places. They could have launched another attack down here with the -3/+3 variant. It wasn't very pleasant. Do the French continue? That's the question. They're going to have 40 more supply points. They can try to punch a hole somewhere here or up here. It's going to be tough, because those reserves that I should have had earlier for the Germans, well, they probably would have stopped this whole thing from happening. A 1 hex advance would have been likely, because I would have had the extra troops to throw in. Now you can see there's quite a bit there, and that's without weakening other parts of the board. So, yeah. Okay, well, the French burned through nearly their entire supply amount making a single attack. Remember, that's like 40 points. Well, I don't remember what it was, but it was above 30. They punched a hole here where there was a fortress. Now, they had a lot of artillery, and artillery is really expensive. That's what eats up the supply, but it boosts your number on 3 hexes. It gets the French above 100, which meant they were able to destroy everything in that hex. Therefore, they weren't able to, because some of it had to retreat. And that reduced the total damage to like 9. They only took 3 themselves, which I forgot to mark down. In part because of the retreat. The fortification has to take the losses first. The hex fell. And now that salient's kind of widening up a little bit, which makes life easier. The French have had trouble because the rail lines not being all in place. Once they get I can't tell if that's a World War II line. I think it is. It looks kind of pale there. So this hex has to go. Now, that's the goal, but I don't have the points to take it anymore. And the Germans are probably hearing the supply total that the French threw out and saying, okay, if they were low before, they're not in much better shape. The question is, do the Germans want to make any kind of assault? And that's a tough call, to tell you the truth. Okay. The weakening of the French line to provide for this salient created an opportunity, and you can see the Germans took advantage of it. They slammed into a single unit using a mobile attack. It was a 4-point unit in a trench. They managed to destroy it completely, which meant it didn't have a place to retreat to, so it wasn't able to extend the line. Now that was this hex, and then that gave them a surrounding aspect for this hex. Not fully surrounded, although I think I have to retreat here instead of there, which causes further problems. Not fully surrounded, but it took away that two adjoining hexes exception, which means the front was exposed. They were able to hit, well, the back was exposed as well as the front. They were able to hit from both sides, eliminate the trench effects from this hex, and take this as well. Now we've got this massive breakthrough threatening the entire, recent French assault salient. And here's the problem. The French have no supplies. They spent everything. It would be a problem even without that. The weakening of the line was the real problem. But the fact that the French don't have supplies to launch further attacks to try to, weaken this. These units are pretty strong, but they have no trench bonuses. All they have is whatever terrain they're sitting in. And unless the attack is against this unit with its woods terrain, we're talking about a 1-point modifier, which means they could be forced to retreat. But the French don't have the forces to do it. So they're going to have to spread their line again to cover this territory. This may mean a falling back from the river line even. I'm not sure. And the French manage the best response they can. They throw a light shield around here. It may or may not be enough. On the bright side, they have terrain in terms of the river here. They didn't give up this last hex. They could have pulled back and strengthened their position, but they think they kind of like this location. Eventually, they think their troops are going to be an advantage, but their overall mass is going to be stronger than the Germans. The Germans are actually increasing the size of the frontage in a sense. If they can break through and, create a bulge and nip it off or force the French out of it, that's great. But as long as the French are able to hold on and make this a more and more ragged front, I think in the long run it's to their advantage. The problem is right now, locally here, they have very weak forces, and they're having trouble extricating stuff from here. I may finish up by pulling some more units out of Paris and trying to drive them up there as a reserve, because I'm having a hard time. These damaged units are trying to make their way back to a headquarters, but the devastated terrain adds two to the cost of entering a hex, which means if they're entering a clear hex from the front into a devastated hex, that takes all their movement. They've only got 4 movement points. So the fact that the French are losing ground in an area, or that they have gained ground in an area and have gone beyond the front lines that they were at, makes it very difficult to plow through all that crap that they have to get through. The rail lines are in place, but they can't load up on a train in the hex that they're withdrawing from. The British and Germans can do that, but the French can't. So they have to pull out for a turn and then rail someplace for a turn, and they can't rail up to the front. And then, whatever they're planning on doing is the next turn, either recharging at a headquarters. There's plenty of replacement points. I'm actually beginning to build cav units over here because I got nothing else that's completely destroyed I can build. The French definitely have a real problem on their hands right now. They did pull a couple of units through. The problem is the French rail net has gotten so crappy. Losing this area over here, it makes it very difficult. This is the main line path that the rail has, and that's where you start seeing replacements coming from France because they got to pull, or from Paris because they got to pull out of the city itself, which is in zones of control. They're also slowly decreasing this one hex. I may pull some out of there. Those are Brits, though. I can't do much with them except slowly shift more. One unit made it here by taking the shortcut, and there were other shortcuts, so I probably should move those a little bit. The Germans performed another mobile attack of opportunity, kind of right in here. Clear terrain, looked like a good situation. There was only 12 strength points. They needed a 6. They didn't have a lot of strength. It was kind of unlikely they were, well, it wasn't terribly unlikely, but they got a minimal roll. Actually, it was very likely that they would cause enough damage to force that to withdraw. They got a minimum roll, though, and the French ended up halting them there. But clearly, the Germans can get enough force to push 12 points of French out of clear terrain. There's more French coming up there to fill in the line. The Germans halted their attack at that point. They don't want to push on. Their goal was to slam into this hex and then be able to get this hex, which under enough power that they could really kind of crack it. They're not able to do that, and the French held kind of a very lucky chance that they did. They caused more damage than the Germans did. They caused 7 against the German units. So it wasn't even, an attritionally advantageous thing. The die rolls just came out horrendous against the Germans for such clean terrain. But the French are going to be able to fix that patch. Well, the Germans were still in something of a conundrum, needing to attack. They launched against here where they had 4 hexes against it. They gained that hex. There were only 8 strength points there. They managed to wipe it out notionally. A strength point got away still. Basically they're trying to even up their line as much as they can at this point. It became pretty obvious they can't break through the defenses. The French were able to get into this gap once it opened up, or once the Germans slowed down. The French are actually almost out of supply. They have, about 10 points of supply left spread throughout headquarters. They're trying to dig it up from everywhere. The Germans don't know that, though. If they did, they would launch more attacks. The Germans actually are having to launch attacks because they're over in supply. But it's hard to realize what your opponent spent. That's my feeling there. If players carefully kept track of and notated what people spent, they would have known the French are in trouble at this point. But they don't really have that feel, and I'm used to playing these kind of games and not knowing, so I don't want to dig into the knowledge of how weak that is. The Germans still felt they have to attack just because of their situation. Now, here didn't look like it was going to be very potent. They were going to be facing -2 for the woods there, but they ended up choosing just as bad a location, Luxembourg. Now, Luxembourg cleans their line up more significantly. This doesn't have the same effect. This has 2 hexes turning into 1, so it tightens them up a little bit. Here they'd have to clear both of these hexes to get any real improvement in terms of depth of the line. Again, nibbling on the edges, but here it was a bad attack. There was some 19 strength points of French, and it did not go well. They actually got decent rolls and still only did 9 to 13 losses that they took back. The Germans are kind of wanting to stop their offensives at this point. But if an opportunity presents itself, they'll take it. The thing is, they had a lot of supply, enough that next month they were going to have to launch. Well, they were going to be over the limit next month. I have to recalculate again. I hate counting. This game is all about counting in terms of there's just so much of it. Shit, I forgot to move all these things too. And I have no idea what this guy up here is. I don't know who he is. Oh, he's somebody who got popped out of a stack here. He's full strength. I don't know where he's supposed to be. I'll find a place for him. That popped out of a stack. So, any game with a lot of counters stacked up is going to have a problem where things kind of fall sometimes. But I'm finding the slick, glossy counters on the glossy map on big stacks. That's always a big problem. Got worse once I started clipping things. Plus, I'm having kind of like this little bit of palsy in my hands. Just the last couple of days, I've been having a lot of trouble doing mechanical things with my tweezers or whatever. Everything keeps falling apart. I know that the slick counters are making it worse. I'm able to deal with this kind of shakiness when they're, nice matte counters or somewhat thinner ones or whatever. But these guys really cause a problem for me. Well, March winds down into April. No more offensives, just kind of positioning and trying to recuperate. The French are the Allies entirely out of supplies. The Germans don't know this, or they would press it harder, but they're doing what they think is best because their own supplies are kind of wavering. They're down in the 70s now. They got plenty. They could launch an offensive, but it's better to wait for an opportunity. Maybe the French will have to attack again before the Germans do. Let's take a look at the front because it's kind of interesting. It's mutated just a little bit here. You can see the Germans getting a little dig down into here. But then this bulge here that didn't used to be there. And then the rest of it has stayed static. I have this little incursion this far. I'm questioning whether to keep that hex, but it's got decent terrain. It's got some wood terrain. If the French are going to attack, they're probably going to have to go through that. So it's kind of appealing, even though it extends my line. And it makes this possibility of really closing the line by taking those territories. But there are enough German troops right now. I don't know what kind of withdrawals we're looking at, though. So it's kind of frightening. It's like, do I want to pull back to this Hindenburg line? If I do, I shouldn't be saving little bits like that. On the other hand, well, keep things open a little bit more flexibly by holding that territory. So we'll just see where it all ends up after things end. We've got the Australians on the board finally, the real Australians, not those Canadians masquerading as them. The English army is quite large. They don't have a tremendous amount of supply, though. They have a decent amount, somewhere around 32 points, enough to launch an attack, but after this turn they'll have some more. They may have to do an attack this turn because they've got Canadian replacements coming in that they don't have a counter for. So they're kind of in this situation where they've got to take some losses in order to make any sense. All right. Oh, what about our demoralization points? The Germans are up to 1,500 and something. The French are still, well, they broke 1,000. They're at 1,100. They don't have too much further to go. But we're not seeing those collapses coming anytime soon. Probably not this year. The Germans, God, I don't remember what they are, 2,000, 4,000, something huge. But the French have actually a real limit. Germany's first is at 3,000, and France's first is at 1,500. And those are going to affect how well they can, continue to fight the war. That's one of the coolest factors about this, that the casualties, etc., have such an effect on the continuing ability to produce replacements, to produce supply points. I like how that plays out. I'm curious to see what that kind of thinking will reflect in the campaign game, although I probably won't get around to seeing it. All right, up it goes.